Hi, Jill here. In this video, I'm going to review the details involved in Assessment Task 1, Developing Your Persuasive Essay. It's only a quick video. It's going to give you an outline and hopefully leave you in a position where you can either get started on your essay or start planning it out. And after viewing this video, you'll be able to join our live Collaborate session where we'll look at these ideas in more detail. And of course, you can also chat about this in your assessment boards in your online with your groups. Keep in mind that this video should be viewed in conjunction with any details in the assessment submissions tab, and that the rubric should be the first port of call for any specific details for this assessment, for this essay.
So the first things you're looking at are the word limit for this assessment. You can see that it's a 1500 word essay, meaning you can write as few as 1350 all the way up to 1650 words. And of course the reference list isn't included in that word count. This assessment is worth 30% of your overall grade, and it's due on Monday morning in week 5. Basically, we're asking you to look at the learning materials, the podcasts, the readings, and the activities. Focus on the concepts that we're covering in weeks 1 to 3. And through this essay, demonstrate your understanding of how language and literacy develop through a model that you're going to explore. You can see that the learning objectives that this assessment covers are learning objectives 1 and 2. We're asking you to look at showing us how you understand language acquisition and literacy development, and that you're beginning to analyse pedagogical approaches. So you're going to be addressing this question: what is the most relevant reading model for addressing 21st century literacy demands? Illustrate your response with examples of classroom practices consistent with this reading model. I'm going to emphasise model here. Don't fall into the trap of writing about a theory. In chapter 4 of the Seeley-Flint text, they talk about the difference between theory and model. So make sure you're clear on the difference and that you do explore a model for your essay. And just explore one model. There's a number of models that we're looking at, and you don't need to describe or explain the alternative models. Just one which you're going to persuade us is the best. You'll use the readings from weeks 1 to 3, as well as your own research. So we want you to head to the Swinburne Library, to Google Scholar, and find some credible peer-reviewed resources, and use them to support your argument. This is the best model because this author says this, and base those ideas on your research. We want you to give examples of classroom practice. For example, the skills model favours explicit teaching of skills. That's explaining my model. And this might be implemented through a phonics program in the early years, such as Jolly Phonics. So there's an example of classroom practice. Another example might be if I were to look at the 4 resources model. It values critical exploration of power balances, and this might manifest itself in classroom practices as a classroom discussion exploring the apparent bias of a text. You'll see that it asks you to write this essay in the third person. Double check with your ELA if you're not too sure about how to write in the third person, or you can chat to your tutor about that as well. Okay. So this essay is marked based on 4 assessment criteria. You can see them here, but I'm going to go into more detail about them in the next few slides. Criteria 1 is your knowledge of literacy development. Your role here is to persuade the reader that your model is the best, that you have a clear understanding of what the model is, and that you can explain why it relates to 21st century skills, literacy demands, and that you've considered the way that it works in a classroom. So I've chosen 2 pictures here. Down the bottom is the reader, a Dick and Jane reader, and it might be illustrating the skills model. So if I'm going to demonstrate my understanding of the skills model, I might be showing that it's about starting with the basics and moving progressively through the skills and building on each skill as I go. Whereas the top picture, I can see 2 younger children, an older child who might be working with them. They've got an iPad, they've got a textbook, they've got some pencils. Perhaps this is an example of the 4 resources model. It might be that the older student is leading a discussion about the validity and credibility of the website on the iPad. Now that's just a speculation, but that might show you that I know what this 4 resources model is all about. So show us that you know what defines the model and that you can link it to 21st century demands. Yep, so the key message for that first criterion, show us that you understand the model. Criteria 2 is about understanding of classroom practices relevant to literacy development. This is where I was talking about classroom practices on the earlier slide. It's all interrelated. So this is where you've got to show that you understand how the theory or the model looks in practice. What would happen in a classroom? What would you see and hear? What are the activities that are happening? What sort of interactions are happening between people in the classroom? So if I were to look at the pictures on this slide, it looks like they've been on an excursion. They've visited the fruit department, and then they've come back to school, and they've written about it. They went to Woolworths. We saw lots of pumpkins. So this might be an example of innovative and relevant practices. Rather than staying in school and viewing texts which are out of context, which might be a skills model approach, these students might have been out immersed in environmental print and interacting with texts in a meaningful way. So that could be an example of a whole language approach, a whole language model. Consider the things that you're learning in your other units. If you've studied other units here at Swinburne already, think about what are best practices that are coming through in 21st century skills, and how does this relate to 21st century demands for literacy? If you were to, for week 1, we're looking at the skills model. If you were to explore that in an industrial model of schooling where students are completing identical commercially developed worksheets, you'll have a pretty tough job to convince us that that's the best model for teaching literacy. Try and think of innovative practices that are going to engage students and be really relevant in today's classrooms. And so Criterion 2, link the theory to contemporary classroom practice. Criterion 3 is examining whether you've got a good format and structure to your essay, whether you include conventions of academic English and your capacity to argue persuasively. So make sure you understand what a persuasive essay includes. Jump onto Google, check out what a persuasive academic essay is all about, and then come back and chat to your ELA and the rest of your group and say, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you reckon? Is that persuasive enough? Who's got some other ideas? So bounce your ideas around with your peers. Make sure you include persuasive language inside your writing. So terms like, it is clear that, it is of utmost importance, it is unquestionably, things that really do push your argument. And in order to get the best marks, we encourage you to draft, redraft, edit it, re-edit it. Make sure that you've got really good, strong use of active language in your writing, active voice, and do make use of your tutor and smart thinking, as those services can help you out with your writing. We'll talk a bit more about those in our groups as well. So look for a clear structure in your essay. You need an introduction, a series of paragraphs, and a conclusion. You'll notice that the criterion in the rubric requires you to have a clear thesis statement, and it talks about it putting your clear thesis statement in the first paragraph. So the thesis statement might be, as I've written in red here, the most relevant reading model for addressing 21st century literacy demands is, and you name your model. And this essay will explore, then you tell us where you're going to head with your essay. So that's a really basic thesis statement and opening paragraphs. And that would certainly that would be enough for a pass. It could also be enough for a high distinction as well. So long as you're making a clear statement, outlining where you're going, then that's spot on. You can see I've given some ideas here about how to develop a series of paragraphs and what to include in those paragraphs. And make sure you add a conclusion to your work, which doesn't just restate your introduction, or it doesn't just say where you've been, but it reiterates where you've been and sums up your argument. It gives your reader something to think about and to reinforce where you've been. Consider running your plan past your tutor. You're welcome to post small sections of your work into the discussion boards, into the assessment question and answer threads, and seek feedback from your peers and from your ELA. And remember that you can submit a draft to Smart Thinking, and they'll be able to give you some feedback on ways to develop your language and further develop the way that you've written your piece. They won't tell you whether it's on track, whether the content is on track, but they're good to help out with whether your structure and your language. Spend time planning. It will definitely benefit your draft. Think about what ideas each paragraph is going to convey, and make sure that those ideas develop sequentially through your essay. It's really clear when people have a clear plan. We can see it in your writing. It stands out really well. If you wanted to post your plan up to your discussion board, that's fine too. We'll give you some ideas about whether we think that'd work for your essay. Okay, and then criterion 4 looks at your academic research and your referencing. So as I said earlier, make sure you're drawing your citations from scholarly literature Make sure you're using the Swinburne Library and Google Scholar or Google Scholar, favouring those sources over a basic Google search. And an APA guru. If you aren't yet, then start researching what APA is all about. There's lots of guides around in the Swinburne portal as well as inside our units, and there's also a wealth of them on the internet. And feel free to post questions on the discussion board, or your tutor's really good for APA as well. You can ask them about any queries you have. Now, this assessment is being marked on a holistic rubric, and we encourage you to think about these holistic rubrics with an analogy of learning how to drive a car. So if I was heading out in a car and I'm really good at changing gears, but I don't know the road rules, you wouldn't pass your road test if you went straight through a stop sign, even though you know how to get the car going. Similarly, if I'm great at driving in a straight line but can't go faster than 10 kilometres an hour, I'm not an average driver. I'm not a good driver. A holistic rubric is a little bit like that. If you've got some outstanding research in your essay, but your paragraph structure and the way that it's written isn't very clear, then you can't achieve a high standard for your overall essay. So place high importance on all of those areas. Make sure that you're clear in your ideas. Make sure you're sharing accurate information. Make sure that you're basing your discussion and your persuasive writing on academic research, and those are the best ways to get the best marks. So speaking of marks, let's compare what the PASS and the HD standards are for this assessment. Standards first. So at a minimum, you need to introduce the topic and identify 21st century literacy demands. You'll probably want to devote at least part of a paragraph towards naming some 21st century literacy demands, along with an author citing some research that says where you're basing those 21st century literacy demands on. To meet the PASS standard, you need to have a clear thesis statement in your introduction. You can see that here as the second bullet point. And it also needs to introduce key points of the argument. So that's where I talked about in that red writing a few slides ago. This is the best model, and I'm going to tell you about these things. I'm going to outline the 21st century literacy demands. I'm going to explain the key concepts of the model. I'm going to relate these to classroom practice, and then I'm going to, etc., etc. So that's your introduction. I've bolded and underlined reading model here. Make sure you do talk about model. If you don't name the model, see here it says clearly stated and appropriate. If you don't name the model, we can't give you a pass for this assessment. But so long as you name the model, talk about details of the model, then you're right on track. At a PASS standard, you might touch on persuasive language, or you might just be mostly describing the theories and the model and the classroom practices. And moving up towards a higher distinction, you'll be more and more persuasive, have a better grasp of the language. And the examples to get a pass, you will need to include examples of classroom practices. We understand that not everyone's been on prac, but base these ideas on the readings. So Sealy Flint, the e-text, they do include examples that you can build from. Of course, you'll also have your own experience in schools. You'll be able to draw on things like educational blogs will give you ideas about how they might, how classroom practices, examples of classroom practices. And of course, you've got your peers and your ELA. So if you're stuck for examples, have a chat on the boards. Really can't work out how this works, guys. Can someone help me out? And for a pass standard, you need to demonstrate competence in academic writing. This is an English unit. We're looking for you to show us that you've got a good grasp of written English and that you'll be able to teach students based on that, based on your current competence. And for a high distinction, which we're all aiming for, we'll move beyond just naming the literacy demands, and we'll show insight. You'll be able to understand those, you'll be able to explain those 21st century demands more clearly, and perhaps with some links which show that you understand their relevance. You'll present a persuasive argument. You'll be using that persuasive language. Your argument's sound and logical. It develops as your essay progresses. It's free from ambiguity and contradiction. You can see all those terms in there. So the stronger your argument, the more chance you are of getting a high distinction. The illustrations of practice, which are your examples, examples of classroom practice, they represent relevant and innovative ways of teaching English. This is what I was hinting at back a few slides ago on the example of the pumpkins. So you could have sat down with a worksheet and read the word pumpkin and stuck a P on it and ticked off that skill that children know how to write the P. But that teacher had chosen to take her children to the supermarket and explored pumpkins in a meaningful way. They had a reason for writing. They had P for pumpkin, but they also had a whole wealth of other things that they were learning about. So that's an example of how you might be naming classroom practices which are more relevant and innovative. And you provide relevant scholarly and contemporary evidence. The stronger your research, the more chance you have of getting a high distinction. It's also about your use of language and your ability to edit your work so that there's very few or no errors in your writing. So, with all those things in mind, you might think, well, what if I get stuck? What do you talk to your ELA, you chat with your group, you attend the Collaborate sessions. So our Collaborate will be in week 2 next week. You can chat to Smart Thinking and your tutor. Remember that they don't tell you whether you understand the theories and models, the content of your assessment, but they will help you with the language use. And if you do find that you need an extension for some particular reason, contact your ELA. And if you need longer than 48 hours, then head through to the student portal and send through a submission, and that submission will come to me. These are suggestions for formatting your work. You'll be able to see these in the slides that I've got if you need to come back to them. We won't mark you down if you don't do these things, but for one thing, they make our marking job easier, and also they help to show that you understand APA formatting. So aim to do these things, aim to choose a clear font, especially aim to choose double line spacing because that gives us somewhere to place comments and feedback to support your learning, and look at presenting your work in a professional manner. And when it's all finished, please submit your assessment through the submissions link. Aim to get a receipt for your submission and just double check that it's correct. So when you open it up, sometimes it's easy to click the wrong file and think that you've done it, but you've actually submitted something from another unit or another something else on your computer. So do just double check it. And good luck, everyone. We're here to support you. We're not here to trick you and get you worked up about this essay. It really is a great chance for you to develop your understanding of the models, which are central to not just this unit, but your teaching in the future. So we really hope that you can develop a great idea of the models, and we'll all work together towards developing your understanding.
So the next step is to come along to our Collaborate session. In that session, we'll be talking about these things. We'll be answering some questions that you might have after viewing this video. We'll be brainstorming some 21st century literacy demands together. We'll explore the key features of the models and we'll review the features of persuasive essays. We're really looking forward to seeing you in there and getting to have a chat with you. So I'll see you soon.